When love starts to feel like a burden, when it feels more like something you're dragging than something you're holding, it's time to pause. Not to question the love, but to question the responsibility behind it. Love, at its core, is supposed to feel light. Not because it's always easy or perfect, but because it's shared. It's mutual. It's a partnership. And when two people are carrying the weight together, it becomes manageable, even meaningful. But when one stops showing up, when one stops owning their part, the balance shifts, and suddenly what once felt like joy starts to feel like pressure. We don't often talk about responsibility in love. We talk about passion, about chemistry, about attraction. But rarely do we ask who is showing up with accountability. Because it's not enough to say, I love you. It's what we do after those words that matters. Responsibility means being aware of how we speak, how we listen, how we support, and how we show up, even when it's inconvenient. Love without responsibility becomes a burden. At first, that might sound counterintuitive. We're taught that love is about feelings, connection, chemistry, that magical spark. And in the beginning, it often is. There's excitement, effort, energy. But love, real love, doesn't survive on emotion alone. It survives on responsibility, the conscious, daily decision to show up, to communicate, to support, to own your part. When responsibility is missing, love begins to strain. One person starts to feel like they're doing more, giving more, carrying more, and what was once beautiful starts to feel exhausting. That's the burden, not the love itself. But the imbalance created when one or both people stop taking responsibility for the relationship. Responsibility in love doesn't mean controlling or fixing your partner. It means being aware of how your actions, words, and decisions affect the other person. It's understanding that relationships aren't sustained by just wanting someone. They're sustained by the willingness to work through the uncomfortable moments, to apologize, to listen, to change. That's responsibility, and without it, love becomes an emotional weight that no one wants to carry. Think about it, when something goes wrong, how easy is it to blame the other person? To say they don't understand me, or they never listen. But true responsibility asks a harder question. What am I contributing to this dynamic? It's easy to love when everything feels good, but the true test of love is how we behave when things feel hard. Do we show up or do we shut down? Do we own our part? Or do we expect the other person to do all the emotional labor? When people feel drained in relationships, it's not usually because they don't care. It's because they feel alone in the effort. They feel like they're carrying all the emotional weight while the other person has checked out or become passive. Over time, this creates resentment. It erodes trust. It leads to silence, arguments, emotional distance. Not because the love is gone, but because the responsibility that sustains it has vanished. And here's the thing, responsibility isn't glamorous. It's not the highlight reel we see on social media. It's the quiet decisions. It's choosing to stay calm in a fight, choosing to ask questions instead of assuming, choosing to prioritize your partner even when life gets busy. Those small decisions add up. They build the foundation of lasting love. Without them, even the most passionate connection will eventually collapse under its own weight. There's a false belief that love should always be light and easy, that if it gets heavy, it must be wrong. But the truth is, love will get heavy at times. Life brings stress, loss, change. What makes the difference is whether both people are willing to carry that weight together. That shared effort, that mutual responsibility is what keeps love from becoming a burden, because no one minds lifting something heavy when they know someone else is lifting it too. Love without responsibility isn't romantic, it's exhausting. It's confusing, it turns something sacred into something stressful. But when responsibility is present, love becomes resilient. It becomes a safe place to land. A partnership built on more than feeling, built on action, awareness, and commitment. So if love feels heavy right now, ask yourself, where is responsibility missing? Because once it's reclaimed by both people, love begins to breathe again. It begins to lift. Not because life is suddenly easier, but because you're no longer carrying it alone. And that makes all the difference. Responsibility is the foundation of emotional safety in any relationship. Emotional safety isn't created by words alone. It's created by consistency, honesty, and a willingness to take ownership of our actions. It's not about being perfect. It's about being accountable, especially when it's hard. So people often think emotional safety is just about kindness or affection, but it runs deeper than that. It's about whether or not you feel like you can be fully seen without being judged. It's about whether or not your vulnerability will be met with care, not criticism. And that safety doesn't just happen by chance. It's the direct result of someone consistently taking responsibility for how they show up in the relationship. When a person takes responsibility, they make the relationship a place where trust can grow. They don't just react, they reflect. They don't lash out and then pretend nothing happened. They acknowledge their impact. They own their tone. They ask questions like, did that hurt you? Or how can I do better? That's what creates a space where the other person feels safe enough to speak honestly, to share deeply, to be themselves without fear of being dismissed or attacked. Without responsibility, emotional safety disappears. It's replaced by confusion, fear, and instability. Because when people avoid responsibility, they often rewrite the truth. They gaslight, they deflect, they turn things around. Suddenly, instead of solving problems together, everything becomes a battle of who's right and who's wrong. And when someone feels like they constantly have to defend their emotions or prove their pain, that relationship stops feeling safe. Emotional safety is built moment by moment. It's built in the way we handle tension. It's in how we respond when someone says, "You hurt me." If the answer is defensiveness, the walls go up. But if the answer is responsibility, "I hear you, I didn't realize that, and I'm sorry," that's when walls come down. That's when people start to feel like they can trust again. Responsibility is not weakness, it's emotional strength. It says, "I care more about this connection than I do about being right." Taking responsibility also means being clear about your needs and boundaries. It's not just about owning your mistakes, it's about owning your truth. When you're honest about what you feel and what you expect, you make the relationship predictable in a healthy way. You eliminate the guesswork. That kind of clarity reduces anxiety because emotional safety thrives in spaces where people don't have to read between the lines. And let's be honest, nobody feels safe with someone who always blames others. When there's no accountability, everything becomes a risk. You never know what mood the other person will be in, whether your concerns will be met with understanding or ignored. That instability breeds emotional distance. It causes people to shut down, to hold back, to stop trying. Not because they don't care, but because they don't feel safe enough to continue. On the other hand, when both people in a relationship take responsibility for their emotions, their reactions, their part in every interaction, the relationship becomes a secure place to land. You know you'll be heard. You know you won't be punished for speaking the truth. You know you can be human and still be loved. That's the power of responsibility. It turns conflict into growth. It turns miscommunication into clarity. It turns fear into trust. Emotional safety doesn't mean everything is always peaceful. It means even when things are difficult, there's enough responsibility in the room to handle it with care. That's the foundation of love that lasts. Not just love that feels good, but love that feels safe. Blame is the shortcut that always leads to disconnection. It might feel good in the moment to point the finger, to say this is your fault, to make someone else responsible for our pain. But that moment of release comes at a cost. Blame doesn't bring us closer. It pushes us apart. It doesn't heal anything. It hides the real issue behind anger and accusation. And over time, it creates a gap between people that gets harder and harder to bridge. When we blame, we trade curiosity for control. We stop asking what's really going on here and instead decide, I already know, and it's your fault. Blame shuts down the conversation. It creates defensiveness. The other person stops listening and starts protecting themselves. Instead of opening up, they shut down. And just like that, the connection breaks. Blame is fast. It's reactive. It's an emotional escape hatch when we don't want to sit with discomfort. But relationships, real, meaningful, lasting relationships, require more than just reacting. They require reflection. And reflection asks a harder question. What part did I play? Not because we're always wrong, but because ownership opens the door to growth. Blame slams that door shut. When someone feels blamed, they stop feeling safe. Even if they care, even if they love you, they begin to associate the relationship with criticism and shame. It no longer feels like a place of partnership. It starts to feel like a courtroom. Every disagreement becomes a trial. Every mistake gets magnified. There's no room for vulnerability because everyone's on defense. And that's how emotional disconnection begins. What makes this so tragic is that most blame doesn't come from a place of cruelty. It comes from pain. We blame when we're hurt. We blame when we feel unseen, unheard, or unsupported. But instead of saying, I feel scared, or I feel neglected, we say, you always do this, or you never care. And the message gets lost because it's wrapped in accusation. The pain behind the blame doesn't get addressed. It just gets louder. The only way to stop this cycle is to shift from blame to responsibility. That doesn't mean taking the blame for everything. It means owning your emotions. It means saying, here's what I'm feeling, instead of here's what you did. It means replacing judgment with curiosity, assumptions with questions. That's how connection is restored. Not by proving a point, but by proving you care. Blame might win the argument, but it loses the relationship. Responsibility, on the other hand, creates space for repair. It creates a tone where both people can show up honestly, without fear of being attacked. That tone is everything. Because the truth is, most people don't leave relationships because of conflict. They leave because they feel chronically misunderstood and emotionally unsafe. And blame is one of the biggest reasons why. When we stop blaming, we start building. We build trust, we build respect, we build emotional intimacy. That doesn't mean we ignore when someone hurts us. It means we express it in a way that invites dialogue, not distance. We become accountable for our triggers, our wounds, our expectations. And we give the other person a real chance to understand us. In the end, blame might feel like strength, but it's really fear in disguise. Fear of being wrong, fear of being hurt, fear of being vulnerable. But relationships grow not when we avoid fear, but when we face it together. Disconnection doesn't happen when people make mistakes. It happens when they stop taking responsibility for how those mistakes are handled. So the next time you feel the urge to blame, pause, choose connection over control, because that choice, though harder, always leads somewhere better. Real love is a daily practice of choosing, not expecting. It's not something that simply happens once and then sustains itself forever. Love isn't a one-time promise. It's a continuous decision. Every single day, you choose to love the person in front of you, not the idealized version of them, not who they were when you first met, but who they are today. And that kind of love requires intention, not entitlement. Expecting someone to love you perfectly, to always know what you need, to never fall short, creates pressure instead of connection. It leads to disappointment because no one can meet the unspoken demands we place on them when we expect love to run on autopilot. Love doesn't thrive in the presence of assumptions. It thrives in the presence of awareness, of noticing, of choosing, even when it would be easier not to. We fall into trouble when we treat love like a reward we're owed, rather than a relationship we're responsible for. We start to expect that our partner should just know how we feel, should just give us what we want, should never trigger us or fail us. But those expectations quietly build resentment, because when they're not met, and inevitably no one meets them all the time, we feel wronged. Not because our partner truly failed us, but because we stopped choosing to engage with love as an action and started relating to it as an entitlement. Love is not passive. It's not waiting around for the other person to show up the way we want. It's showing up ourselves every day and saying, I choose you again. It's choosing to listen when you're tired. It's choosing to listen when you feel misunderstood. It's choosing to speak the truth even when it's uncomfortable. And it's choosing to love not only when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. This kind of daily choice keeps love alive. Because love is not about perfection. It's about presence. When you stop choosing, you start coasting. And eventually you start disconnecting. The relationship begins to feel stale or worse, like a chore. But it didn't get there overnight. It got there because one or both people stopped practicing the small, everyday acts that keep love active and real. Real love means choosing to stay curious about each other. It means continuing to ask, how are you? Really? Even after years together. It means choosing to see your partner not as the sum of their flaws, but as someone still growing, just like you. It means giving grace on the days they fall short and expecting grace on the days you do. This doesn't mean settling for less or ignoring unmet needs. In fact, choosing love daily is what gives you the strength to face hard truths, to say, we need to talk, to say, I want more intimacy, or I need to feel seen. That's what real love allows. Not comfort at the cost of connection, but connection that includes honesty, even when it shakes things up. We don't build lasting relationships by waiting for the other person to always get it right. We build them by choosing to engage, to forgive, to try again. Love is built in the everyday effort, not the big gestures, but the consistent ones. A hand on the back when they're stressed, a check-in after an argument, a moment of stillness together before the chaos of the day. So if you want love to last, don't just expect it to be there. Choose it. Choose them. Choose the work. And most importantly, choose to be someone who shows up, even on the days when it would be easier to walk away. That's where real love lives, not in the fantasy, but in the practice. Maturity in love is measured by what you're willing to own. It's not about how romantic you can be when things are good, or how passionate your connection feels in the beginning. It's about how you handle the hard moments, the miscommunications, the triggers, the disappointments. Immature love points fingers. Mature love looks in the mirror and asks, what's my part in this? In any relationship, there will be conflict. That's a given. But what separates a strong, healthy relationship from a fragile one is how those conflicts are navigated. When someone is emotionally mature, they don't run from discomfort. They step into it with honesty and accountability. They don't deflect or deny. They own their tone, their words, their reactions. And that ownership becomes the bridge that keeps connection alive, even in tense moments. Maturity in love isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about owning them. It's about saying, I was wrong, or I didn't realize how that affected you. That kind of vulnerability requires courage. It's much easier to defend yourself, to explain why you did what you did, to make it about the other person's reaction. But emotional maturity means putting down your ego in favor of the relationship. It means understanding that love isn't about winning, it's about understanding. When someone refuses to take responsibility for their impact, they might maintain the illusion of control, but they slowly destroy trust. Because without ownership, there's no repair. And without repair, pain accumulates, resentment grows. The relationship begins to feel unsafe, not because there's no love, but because there's no accountability. You can't feel emotionally close to someone who constantly avoids responsibility for how they show up. Mature love, on the other hand, knows that discomfort is part of growth. It doesn't fear conflict. It uses conflict to go deeper, to learn more about the other person, to see what needs healing, what needs changing, and what needs more attention. That kind of love doesn't shy away from hard conversations. It welcomes them. Because when you love someone, you want to understand them, not invalidate them. What you're willing to own says everything about your emotional intelligence. Are you willing to own your triggers, your childhood wounds that get projected onto your partner? Are you willing to own the fact that sometimes you shut down, lash out, or get distant when you're scared? These are the things that create emotional maturity. Not perfection, but awareness. Not always being right, but always being real. Maturity is also about owning your needs, not expecting your partner to read your mind or rescue you from your feelings, but being able to say, here's what I need, or here's what I'm struggling with. That kind of ownership builds intimacy. It invites closeness. It shows your partner that you're not here to hide, you're here to grow. It's easy to love when everything is light and easy. But true love is forged in the fire of difficult moments. And the most powerful question you can ask in those moments is, what part of this is mine to own? Not as a way to take all the blame, but as a way to stay grounded. To keep growing. To keep choosing the relationship, even when it challenges you. When both people in a relationship are committed to owning their part, their emotions, their flaws, their patterns, the relationship becomes a place of healing, not harm. It becomes a space where both people feel seen, respected, and emotionally safe. That's what mature love looks like. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's honest, steady, and deeply human. In the end, love isn't measured by how good you are at avoiding conflict. It's measured by how well you repair, how honestly you communicate, and how bravely you own the parts of yourself that are still learning. Because that's what real love asks of us. Not perfection, but responsibility. A relationship thrives when both partners carry their share. Not just the visible, obvious parts, like chores, bills, or planning, but the emotional weight. the communication, the effort it takes to stay connected through life's inevitable ups and downs. When one person is doing all the emotional labor, all the initiating, all the repair, and the other is just receiving, the relationship slowly begins to imbalance, and over time, that imbalance creates distance, resentment, and disconnection. Carrying your share doesn't mean splitting everything 50/50 all the time. Life doesn't work in perfect balance every day. There will be seasons when one person is more tired, more stressed, more in need of support. That's natural. But in a healthy relationship, both people remain committed to showing up, to contributing, to making sure the other person doesn't feel alone in the effort. It's not about equal moments, it's about mutual commitment. Emotional responsibility is a huge part of this. It means being aware of your moods and how they impact your partner. It means communicating openly instead of shutting down or expecting them to read your mind. It means being willing to say, I'm struggling right now, but I don't want to take it out on you, or I need a moment, but I'll come back to this. That kind of self-awareness is a gift to the relationship because it keeps the emotional environment safe and respectful. When only one person is managing the tone of the relationship, the weight becomes too much. It starts to feel like parenting, not partnership. One person becomes the emotional caretaker while the other gets to disengage or act out without consequence. That's not a foundation for love. That's a breeding ground for burnout. Carrying your share also means taking initiative, not waiting to be told what's needed, but paying attention. Not assuming everything's fine just because there's no argument, but actively checking in. It's asking questions like, how are we doing? Or, is there anything I could be doing better? These questions show that you care about your role in the relationship, not just what you're getting out of it. And let's be honest, love without effort becomes entitlement. It assumes the relationship will sustain itself just because it once felt good. But relationships are living, breathing things. They need consistent energy from both people, not grand gestures all the time, but daily care. A message that says, I'm thinking of you, a small act of service, a word of appreciation. These things aren't trivial, they're the glue. When both partners are invested, the relationship becomes a place of safety and strength. You know that if you fall, someone will catch you. And they know the same, that mutual trust is what allows people to go through hard times without turning against each other. It creates a team mentality instead of a tug of war. A thriving relationship doesn't mean there's never conflict. It means there's enough mutual effort that when conflict comes, both people are willing to work through it. They don't avoid hard conversations. They don't make the other person carry all the emotional fallout. They each take responsibility for repair. They show up with humility, not blame. In the long run, love doesn't survive on chemistry alone. It survives on shared effort. On two people waking up every day and choosing not just each other, but the work it takes to stay close. That work is not always exciting, but it's what makes love sustainable. And when both partners carry their share, that love doesn't just last, it deepens. Because both people feel valued, supported, and truly seen. That's the kind of love that thrives.